So welcome everyone to this webinar about the planning dashboard, in which we make the link between supply chain, finance, and sales. My name is Ben, one of the co-founders of Horizon, where we develop advanced planning software solutions. Now, if you have any questions, you should be able to put those in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will definitely have time to still cover those after I have shown you what I wanted to show. Now, the aim for today is to inspire you a bit and showcase you how the collaboration between supply chain, finance, and sales can go, how a tool can support that, and how some of these difficulties that many companies face can be overcome. So first, I will very briefly elaborate on those difficulties, and then I will showcase you very concretely within a tool what that can look like and how it can be facilitated. I won't be using any slides or presentation. I will just briefly talk about it and then showcase it very concretely. So the concrete difficulties that I'm talking about is the fact that if you talk about supply chain plan, the forecast, if you talk about finance, they have a budget, and sales, they have their own plans and targets. These typically differ from each other. I spoke to a company earlier this week, and they said in their cycle, the budget versus supply chain planning changes to about 10 to 15% from each other. And then supply chain is somewhere in the middle. And so the question is, okay, how do you reconciliate these if you want to fully reconciliate these at all? But also, how do you propagate these changes to the next steps of planning? And how do you showcase the impact to each different department? Because every department does have their own incentives and risk aversity. And doing that in Excel is typically pretty tedious. And then you might have to create extra reports within PowerPoint or Power BI with IT to generate the right metrics for every individual person. And so what I want to showcase you is this view here, which is a main dashboard. There's a lot of information in it, but let's break it down. So first of all, here on the top is a demand overview. Demand overview shows the supply chain forecast, both from an engine perspective as well as from a planner adjusted perspective. It also shows a budget that can be uploaded and can be changed. And it also shows actual sales, and it can also represent the sales plan for the next couple of months. Based on these different information flows, you can also see here on the bottom what is the actual alignment between these individual streams. And of course, people, depending on what they want to see, they can dive deeper into a specific category, review this on a weekly, monthly, or even quarterly level. There are different channels also. So this is, of course, depending on the business, but a leader, someone from management might want to see it at a very high level, whereas someone managing a part of the portfolio will only see this for their own part. Now, beyond demand planning, there are, of course, the next steps within planning. So if you know, or if you think you know what is going to be bought in which quantities, when and where, you also, based on that, want to set safety stock levels and inventory projections. So here is an overview also of what does your demand against inventory look like. And this again will be viewed by different people in a different manner. Because, for instance, finance, they will look at this and will try and see if there's any way to reduce the inventory to free up working capital. Whereas sales will look at this metric and will look at, based on that, what is my projected service level? Can we actually meet the customer demands, or do we have to notify anybody upfront? When you know these kinds of things and set these kinds of buffers against risk or opportunities within your stock, of course, you also make the translation to actual production. Are you able to meet those targets and plans that you created with your capacity? And what do you still have to purchase? What is outstanding in order to meet those requirements in time? So these extra metrics that you see here are next steps within the planning process. And of course, these will be different depending on if you're a supply chain person, salesperson, or finance person. Now, beyond these metrics, something that's very important, in my opinion, is the fact that you're able to exchange information between departments, but also within a department. And that can be done through tasks. So within a tool, tasks can be suggested by the system or put to different people as to which categories they should look into. It can be an alert or it can be a specific task on a category. Whenever somebody makes an adjustment or a comment, we also here, in this case, generate a log of those changes. And what that serves as is also that you can deep dive into this. So if here somebody says you need to look at whether this change should be incorporated in the budget, this task here has been put to John, for instance, then you can actually know what is the context behind this change, behind this comment, what has been adjusted, but also from a budget perspective and final consensus perspective, what are we going to agree on? And so here, people can exchange information in real time without having to wait on the monthly SNOP meeting, for instance, where you're then going to talk about all of these assumptions and all of this information that people might have. Instead, you can do this on a continuous basis, and you can also let specific people give approval for a certain change to indeed be incorporated in the consensus, depending on what cycle you're in, of course. So we call it this sort of micro SNOP process, where it's more on a continuous basis. Salespeople can add their adjustments and the right person can make these approvals where needed. I did very briefly show you those tasks, and those tasks, of course, come back within the actual planning modules as well. Because if you're a planner and you want to actually execute and deep dive into these things, that you can then do, for instance, here, if we talk about demand planning, a planner can see, okay, on that specific category for that month, what kind of tasks do I have here? What adjustment do I need to look into? Also, what kind of extra information might there be in terms of comments? There's nothing here, but also what are the underlying items so that they can already get a glimpse of the underlying assumptions and forecast as well. So within this dashboard, there is this way to modify these metrics to different people and then also support the actual process with approvals or not, depending on what's needed within the company, of course, because the tool would support the process. And when these changes are made or within the specific modules, of course, this is also propagated down to the actual production planning and inventory planning. So I won't deep dive into these parts right now, but there within specific modules, you'll also want a different view for different people, right? For instance, an inventory view that shows these things typically relevant for finance as well. So that is very briefly here the main dashboard and the workflows. One more thing that I also want to show you is a mobile app that we also have developed alongside with this. So this is not just a web app, this is native for Android and Apple, because managers or leaders, they're not always going to deep dive into the tool and perhaps not on their computer. So they might want to get quick access as to what's relevant, what has been changed within the company. And so here we are pulling from the same database through our APIs. So it's the exact same information that you're seeing, of course. And from here, any person can directly see what are the pending actions or tasks that are crucial. Yes, they are showing here now. Or what kind of changes have been made recently that I should be aware of. Right now, this is more for, like, not for planners themselves probably to look into this. It's more to someone who's not deeply in the day-to-day, but who wants to get an overview. But in a few weeks, we will have an exciting update that I won't spoil yet now. But that will also actually be very useful to smoothen meetings, and that will also happen through this app. So that's also one of the reasons why we're developing this. So that's very briefly an indication of, okay, what can be shown, how can a collaboration between these different departments work with approvals, with sharing information. It's of course specific to any company as to what process you run, but I hope this kind of gives some inspiration and ideas as to how you can do this within a tool and how it can be facilitated. So like I mentioned, there will be time for questions. So I wanted to keep this brief and just showcase it very concretely. And now I will open the floor for any questions that anybody might have. So you can put these in the chat or in the